Broadband Breakfast Live Online. I am Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast, editor and publisher. Very excited to welcome you to an episode of Broadband Breakfast Live Online for today, Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. Wanted to make sure that we set the stage for our discussion here today. We are talking about workforce development and updates in the workforce development field. We hope to have a panelist on our program here, and when we do, we'll go ahead and highlight the panelist. We have talked about workforce development before. In fact, about 3.5 months ago, we had a very thorough session on this topic, and it's in the links to this program so that you can see and go to that event previously in which we talked about the topic. I wanted to let you know just a little bit about some of the upcoming events that we're going to be having here at Broadband Breakfast. Coming up just over 2 weeks from now, on Thursday, March 9th, we will be hosting Big Tech and Speech Summit. That's going to be here in Washington, D.C., where I'm based. That's where we have our headquarters, if you will. We also have worked at and had many events at Clyde's of Gallery Place previously, including our digital infrastructure investment event that we had last November. This event, Big Tech and Speech Summit, is focused on the controversies around online moderation, Section 230. In fact, there's a Supreme Court case right now as we speak, as we're talking. The Supreme Court is, or maybe it just ended, is hearing arguments on a case involving Twitter. Yesterday, it heard arguments on a case involving Google, both on the issue of content moderation and of course the Texas and Florida laws on this topic are also very much in the mix. Although the Supreme Court hasn't agreed to take those cases, it is currently asked the Solicitor General to weigh in on them, and it's widely expected that those will go to the Supreme Court. So this is all a way of saying that there's a lot of attention and focus at this moment on big tech and the issues involving big tech, and we're going to be focused on that in a conference on March the 9th. The program for this show, Broadband Breakfast Live Online, next Wednesday, a week from today, we're going to be previewing the summit, and we'll have the moderators who are participating in our program to join us and talk through that. While we are preparing to gear up, I also wanted to just focus a little bit on some of the recent programs that we've had at Broadband Breakfast. For example, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this and have a little. Actually, I'm not going to share my screen. There's too much going on, and today I'm down an assistant here to focus on this event. But in recent weeks, we have covered at our Broadband Breakfast Live Online events, and you can always go to the tab on Broadband Breakfast, the free events tab. If you go to the archives, you can see the programming, and we do put our programming for our free events immediately online. Last week, we heard from state broadband officers and how they're approaching the next phase of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We actually had 3 different broadband officers from Maine, Andrew Butcher; from Louisiana, we actually had the assistant to beneath the state broadband officer, and then Rebecca Dilg of Utah, and they talked about kind of the next phase after we kind of get through this mapping kerfuffle, and there's a lot going on there, right? A lot of activities that the state broadband officers are considering. The week before, we focused on the Build America, Buy America law and the impact that is having, particularly with the highlighting of that by President Biden in the State of the Union address. And then the week just before that, we focused on the 118th Congress and its focus on broadband and big tech, or that is to say what Congress is likely to do on the topic. And I also want to call to your attention, as I did a little bit already, we do have a very exciting program coming up focused on these tech and broadband issues. Well, I want to basically do something a little different today. Unfortunately, our panelist has not arrived, and one of the blessings, I suppose, and the curses of having a regular weekly event is we always go live at 12 noon Eastern time, and we've had a lot of work to do in preparing for the event that's upcoming on March 9th. So we appreciate your attention on that. So what I'm going to propose we do for this session, we won't necessarily go the full length of time, but let's target a half an hour for today's session. We're gonna talk about the issue of workforce development. There's been a lot. There continues to be a lot. I was hoping that we'd be able to get a bit of an update on the developments regarding workforce development, but in the absence of having the panelists that we had prepared for to be with us, what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up to many of you. We're grateful we have such a regular audience that attends and converges on this location at Broadband Breakfast or on our social channels at 12 noon Eastern time every Wednesday. And so one of the things that we intended to, and we will talk a little bit about here, is the challenges that the industry is facing with regard to workforce issues, and being able to educate the people and deal with and get the additional people that are needed for the build out that we're experiencing, right? Because it's been a little bit while, right, since the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed, but the state funds have been awarded, right? Each state has been granted their awards, but we haven't been able to, the funds haven't gone through the states for BEAD. Now, obviously, the states are receiving many funds on many other areas, right? From the American Recovery Act and the as well as other funding, the Capital Projects Fund of the Treasury Department, and state, and that's not even to account for the state broadband programs that we have. As those programs are rolling out, many more people are engaging in ramping up and considering and where the funds for these, or I should say, where we're going to be able to have the workers that we need for these programs. So let me actually turn to the reporting that we did from our event 3 months ago on Broadband Breakfast. We had a session, and it's in the links to this event. So if you go to that page for the recent events, it'll go right to it. And I'm going to put this in the chat stream so that you all can access this if you are watching via our Zoom link. And again, let me just reiterate the invitation. The panelists that we were planning on are not with us here. So if you have something you'd like to say to this topic, please feel free to send me a message in the chat stream, and we'll be happy to turn it over to you to offer some thoughts. What I'm putting in the link now for everyone, this is the article that was after our last event on this topic. And like I said, we were hoping to get a little bit of an update on some of the issues that individual companies are dealing with in the workforce front. We at this last event, we had the deputy director of Ohio, the state of Ohio's Office of Workforce Transformation, and Eric Leach, who's really quite a well-known leader on the topic, spoke about how Ohio was building out its career pathways for development in this industry. I might also just point out I had a chance to hear Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo at the National League of Cities, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. National League of Cities is still coming up, but the U.S. Conference of Mayors conference last month, and Secretary Raimondo spoke about the CHIPS and Science Act, semiconductor production, but she also spoke quite extensively about IIJA, right? About the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, about the program and the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and the role that funding was playing, and she really encouraged people to get to know their state broadband officer, right? That's really a key component of what's needed if you're a city official or really anyone. Now, I thought this just came across my inbox moments ago before joining. Tomorrow, Secretary Raimondo is also going to be speaking about the Commerce Department's vision on the CHIPS and Science Act, right? And again, these issues, you can kind of see how some of these issues come together, right? We're talking about broadband infrastructure. We're talking about the Buy America provisions, which were emphasized by the president in the State of the Union address 2 or 3 weeks ago. I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And now Secretary Raimondo is going to be speaking here in Washington about the CHIPS and Science Act. Now, CHIPS and Science Act provides a considerable segment of money. 50 billion is standing out in my mind, but I'd want to go back and check the amounts for the development of greater funding for manufacturing in the United States, and in particular semiconductor manufacturing. And if you'll recall, in the State of the Union address that President Biden gave 2 weeks ago, he emphasized how the supply chain needs to begin in America, right? And so, in some ways, I mean, we're really seeing a very ambitious effort by the U.S. government, by the federal government and the executive branch to put pieces into place that will lead to greater resurgence in American manufacturing, American made products. And that's, I think, what we're seeing from the administration. And then the question becomes, okay, well, it's not just issues about, foreign made goods or potentially hostile nations goods. It's also about how do we get that extensive array of knowledge and infrastructure knowledge of each of those domains to be able to really effectively build the kind of advanced manufacturing that we need. America has done exceptionally well the software front, the technology front, right? But maybe to some extent, we let a lot of other nations sort of take the lead on manufacturing. And again, what we're seeing, I don't think this is a partisan move. I think that we certainly saw moves in this direction from the previous administration to kind of emphasize and build up U.S.-based manufacturing. And we're certainly seeing that now with the Democratic president, Joe Biden. Then the question just becomes, well, again, at what cost, right? I mean, in our Buy America, Build America, Buy America session that we did 2 weeks ago, we highlighted some of the challenge of this. And what we heard from the speakers at our Broadband Breakfast Live online session was that the key issue is not so much the fiber, but it's the electronic equipment that powers fiber going into a manufacturing. And so, this kind of, you can, again, see how these issues link together, tie together. How do we get higher capacity infrastructure out? Are we going to insist on, American-made manufacturing, American-made supplies of fiber optics and electronic equipment, and the supply chain issues, the issues not just of where it's made, but do we have the workers to make this? So I appreciate everyone of you who's joined us. We do have a program here every week. I am going to give another, let's just say 2 to 3 minutes to invite any of you who would like on our Zoom call. We stream this on others. It's a little bit harder to include others. If there's anyone on this call who would like to raise your hand and participate, I'll be happy to turn it over to you to speak about some of the experiences you're having in the workforce space. Otherwise, I believe in ending a meeting when the time comes rather than keeping it on for longer than is necessary. So I'm going to wait 2 minutes until 18 past the hour and invite anyone who would like to share your experiences or your questions, right? I mean, again, I'm not the expert on workforce, but we bring experts together here, and I'll be happy to do what I can to address any questions if any of you on this stream would like to weigh in. And while we're waiting for people to offer their opportunity to join in, thanking you for being with us. And we do have a question here, or at least a message that's come through. Let me go ahead and just bear with me a moment here. It might be worthwhile here. I do have a question. Another questioner asks, where do workforce challenges rank in terms of challenges faced by states? What else is top of mind in terms of challenges as states develop their 5-year plan? That is a great question. When you send a direct message to me, I'm assuming you want that to be anonymous, so I'm not going to identify yourself. But thank you for that question, questioner, because this is something we are hearing from our state broadband offices, from the state broadband offices with whom we've interacted on this program and in other settings. And I would say it's in the top 3, quite frankly. Workforce challenges are among those top 3 issues. Maybe if I had to, give a guess on where it stands, the issues of their own kind of staff and manpower, issues of making sure that the mapping is addressed, and workforce development issues are certainly among those. Here I have opened up a page. This is actually a useful page, and I will riff from it. I'm not going to display it just because I don't know a little bit more about it. And while we do that, we've got a new question from Mark Goldstein. Thank you, Mark, for asking your question or a comment here. America Achieves, and I'm not familiar with that organization. So, Mark, if you'd like to come on and explain a little bit about it, feel free. America Achieves released a playbook to help states develop their broadband workforce, creating an expanding, diverse broadband workforce with good jobs and career pathways with the press and direct PDF downloads, press release and PDF downloads. And those are in the chat stream for all of you to see. So thanks for highlighting that. That's appreciated. That's exactly what we're looking for. Again, I know it's a bit unexpected. You have to always be prepared for the unexpected. And so thank you for putting those forward. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add to that, either by video or by chat?
Thanks, Drew. Hey, not necessarily related to that report, but in all the grant work I've been doing, NTIA, USDA, there has been a ramp up in requirements to cover a company's workforce in 3 areas. One, you have to describe all your fair labor practices and compliance. That's a whole rigmarole around, proving you haven't had complaints, that your subcontractors are aligned with the same workforce standards. In Native American related projects, there's something called Teros, there's native hiring. All those things go into your fair workforce. Then there's a highly skilled workforce section, which has to do with your own training and development of your internal staff. And then there's a third section that relates to your efforts in the broader community with trade associations, universities, state entities in that arena, maybe your broadband office, maybe departments of employment and labor. But I really am seeing the segmentation into three somewhat challenging at times sections, and helping some of my grantee applicants especially work on their outreach to labor development programs and partnering with either union or CTIA or other national or regional workforce development. So seeing that requirement, and I imagine it will carry forward into BEAD and other areas. So people should be prepared if they're looking to be a grantee for being able to cover all three of those workforce categories.
Mark, it's great to have you back. You've obviously been a previous guest on Broadband Breakfast Live Online. I know you participated quite actively in the discussion about the middle mile grants. I'm wondering if you would care to give us any update on the progress that you've made on that front.
Sure. I worked on 3 grants, and they're all in what would be called programmatic review, or somewhat snarkily called the bonus round, because the structure of the middle mile grant grading was unique in my experience. There are 3 phases. Eligibility: is your application generally accepted? Merit review on a scale of 0 to 100 based on weighting factors. And then if you advanced, and all 3 of the grants I worked on have advanced, you're in what they call programmatic, where there's 8 weighting factors, and up to 80% on top of your original score if you were to achieve all of that. And so they are in programmatic review. I have had to answer fairly challenging rounds of questions on all 3, and the shot clock for those responses have only been like 5 days, sometimes including a weekend, which have made them a bit stressful to respond to. I have had 2 of those 3 have somewhat innovative in-kind strategies that we did talk about when I was on your show with Sarah Blue. And that had to do with valuing existing middle mile that you're bringing to the table as part of your open access middle mile. And so you had to match at least 30%. You got extra points at 41 or 50% match. And 2 of the 3 grants had innovative strategies, an electrical utility for bringing 1,300 miles of new open access fiber from their existing command and control on top of 700 proposed new miles, and in another place offering 100 gigabit per second backhaul to the new network segment for resiliency and a route. So all 3 are in programmatic, and I am expecting rolling decisions starting next month. They previously, the program date was March 1st for award announcements, and I do expect from the activity rolling awards to start at least sometime in March.
Great. Thanks for being willing to chime in, Mark. It's great to hear from you again. I was just starting to say that I was sent something by one of our attendees. It actually looks like a great document. Feel free to share if you'd like, attendee who sent this along. But like I said, if you send me a direct message, I'm going to assume you don't want to be identified. So this document from, again, one of you all attending today just highlights some issues with workforce and fair labor practices that states or really anyone who's involved in broadband projects needs to be focused on and aware of. And I might just point out that state plans for a broadband build out may include using directly employed workforce as opposed to subcontracting workforce. I'm not saying that's a requirement. I'm just saying this is a kind of a point for consideration. Paying prevailing wages and benefits to workers, including compliance with Davis-Bacon and Service Contract Act requirements when applicable. Now, again, this is obviously an issue that we see come up. It is sometimes talked about as a difficulty, a drawback, but we're definitely in a moment where wages are rising so fast anyway, right? That this has been referred to. We're not in a recession, we're in a rich session. That's what the Wall Street Journal called it. And by that, I think the Wall Street, well, in fact, I know because from the article, they highlighted all of the ways in which income is rising for the lower quintile and quartile of the labor force, and not rising as much or at all for those in the higher quintile or quartile. And so we're basically seeing, I mean, it's not huge, but we're basically seeing a minimization of the income inequality that had been going on for decades. And some of this is because of rapidly rising wages, particularly for entry level or blue collar workers. And so these are certainly part of the discussion, and they're part of the broadband discussion. Some of these additional points regarding fair labor practices in a highly skilled workforce include, local hire provisions and describing plans to engage with local workforce boards, training partners, labor and community organizations. Those were very much discussed at the session we had last March that I referred to. This is the top of the chat. If you're just joining us, I'm pointing out that we're having a discussion here on workforce development. We don't have any panelists unless anyone wants to raise your hand and participate. The link I've just sent through the Zoom chat is a link to an article about our last session on this topic three months ago, and I encourage you. Mark Goldstein has also sent forth the Telecom Interagency Working Group report on workforce needs, and that's available at the URL in the chat window. We'll put that on the page for this event for everyone to access later on. Going back to the document regarding fair labor practices in a highly skilled workforce. Obviously commitments to union neutrality, right? We're not necessarily, certainly we at Broadband Breakfast not taking a position on this, but I'm saying that many are not saying that companies need to, take a position on unionization, but obviously not against union labor. Use of labor peace agreements where applicable, use of an appropriately credentialed workforce, steps to prevent the misclassification of workers, and consider the creation of job quality as a scoring criteria, i.e. jobs that exceed the local prevailing wage for an industry in the region. So thank you for sending this along. These are some good points worth considering. As I said at the top, I'm certainly not an expert in the workforce issues, but I am grateful for as many of you who are, and I thank you for those who have participated. We'll give another minute to conclude, and we'll have an early conclusion to this episode. I want to remind everyone that we will be back next week, March 1st, and our program next week, we're going to be focusing on the upcoming Big Tech and Speech Summit. The event in person is taking place Thursday, March 9th. Our free preview event is next Wednesday at 12 noon, as always. And maybe I'll give this last word again, unless we hear some others. Mark Goldstein has again put in the chat window here a Government Accountability Office report on telecommunications workforce. Additional workers will be needed to deploy broadband, but concerns exist about availability. That report is in the link. We will definitely put this on the site for this event. Thank you for joining us, spending this shortened time with us at 12 noon. Until next week, when we will be back at 12 noon for 1 hour. I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast, and I thank each of you for being with us, spending this time with us. See you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.